Hello, and welcome to Progress Junior Golf with Live Sport Now and the England Golf Young Ambassadors. My name's Steve Jackson, and this is Ian Waterhouse.
Hello, Steve Jackson. How are episode 24?
24,
Steve, 24. Yeah. Do you know what? When you first said I've got this idea for a junior golf podcast back in January, was it January or even December?
It might be before that, yes.
It might be before that. I didn't think. It's just flown by, hasn't it? And here we are, almost end of November, 24 episodes in.
Absolutely.
We will be producing an end of year report as well. So we can tell you how many people have watched, how many people we've reached, how many people have engaged, how many people have liked, comment. And if you do have a question, I do have to get this in. Sorry, Steve, I'll come back to you shortly.
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
If you do have a question, exactly this, that it says comment below. We can see your comments. We want to hear from you. If you comment over at Live Sport Now on YouTube, there is a link in the body of this broadcast. We can show your comment on screen. So please do get your questions in. Steve.
Absolutely. Yes, so this podcast is, as Ian mentions, it's all about junior golf. It's about the next generation of golfers. It's about trying to get more boys and girls playing the game of golf. This, as you mentioned, 24th Progress Junior Golf podcast we've done. This evening, we've got a massive topic to tackle. Safeguarding even in junior golf. Now, it's a subject which, when this goes wrong, it can have serious repercussions. So it's something that clubs, counties, organisations, tours, junior organisers, parents, even juniors, basically everyone needs to look at and then to make sure that they get it right. We will address some of the significant problems involved in this that can crop up and the impact they can have on all involved. But safeguarding isn't just about avoiding those wrong types of headlines, if you like. It's very easy to find the negatives in this subject, but we are here to discuss the ways that safeguarding can have a positive impact as well on junior golf. After all, Absolutely. It's all about providing an environment for youngsters to prosper. And obviously, by making it safe, it's going to help everyone, hopefully. So on the show then, to help us out, then we have got England Golf Lead Safeguarding Officer Petra Duvanna. She's coming on the show. I did a pre-recorded interview with her earlier this week. We discussed a variety of subjects, but in particular, the nationwide project called Safe Golf, which is run by England Golf, but they have very similar schemes with Ireland Golf and also Scotland and also Wales as well. So it's really important that we discuss that. Now, in normal circumstances, we would have had an England Golf Young Ambassador join us live on the podcast. This week, well, it's slightly different for two reasons. I'll go through the first reason why it's slightly different, because we were supposed to have a parent on, and we were going to go for a parent of one of the young ambassadors, which is Petra Horsted. His daughter, Emily, is a young ambassador. Emily has been on the show before, and she will actually be on before the end of the year on another podcast we've got coming up. So we're going to have a chat with Peter today. Now, unfortunately, he's not been very well this last couple of days.
He's not blessing.
No, that's it. He's got a bit of a cold. I think most of us haven't, of some description. He did contact us early today to say that he was going to hope to get on. So we are still hopeful that he will come on, kind of thing. So if suddenly Peter pops up, you'll know why, because he's managed to get himself out of his bed and managed to come on the podcast. But I'm sure we can.
You're stuck with me and Petra. So great to see Petra. Not so good to see me. So no, sorry, everyone.
Yes, but first things first. So let's cover the latest junior golf news then. As you can appreciate, this time of the year, not really that many competitions. It is winter time. There have been a few. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was at a junior event in Bedfordshire just over a week ago. Actually, a really good turnout as well for it. I think there was about 30 odd players playing in that event, considering the weather conditions. So well done to all those who took part in that. The Shires Junior Golf Tour, which is a tour which I'm actually going to get more involved with organising competitions for them. They've got their first winter tournament coming up a week on Sunday. That takes place at Brampton Heath. So there are competitions out there to play in. And I know that a lot of also clubs are holding junior presentations in recent weeks. Of course, they tend to do it at the end of the season, which I think is a fantastic idea. Get all the kids and parents together, have a really special night and do a proper presentation, as opposed to, we've all been at those events whereby they've done a presentation, there's been two men and his dog watching it, kind of thing. Well, why don't you all have a proper evening, sometime in the winter? And I know a lot of clubs are doing that. So congratulations to anyone who's been picking up some prizes. I've been looking on some of the social media, and there has been a lot of kids out there who've been playing some fantastic golf this year. So well done to everyone. Also mentioned as well, the Progress Junior Golf website. Lots of tours and organisations are in the process of putting together their schedules for next year. So on previous Progress Junior Golf, we are going to be updating the diary for those in the coming days, weeks and months. So please keep an eye out on that, because we've got all the major tours on there, all the major counties, the clubs, any basically as you well know, Ian, anything which is out there junior-wise, it's on there. So if you want,
there's the website, like
absolutely,
there.
That's it. Yes. So
and actually, just on your website, Steve, to make it even easier, you don't even have to type that website out down there, because again, there is a link in the body of this broadcast. It says find out about junior golf here. Click that link next to it. It'll take you straight through to that website. You don't even have to type it out.
Fantastic. Right. Now, there have been some competitions, not many, like we say. There's actually one taking place at the moment, so we won't give the final results because obviously it's taking place at the moment. I think the final day is tomorrow, and that's the Junior European Open. It takes place over in Hacienda Links Golf Resort over in Spain. It's the 30th edition of this. I think Sky Sports are covering it. So I think they're going to be doing something on it with Nick Doherty.
Never heard of them.
Well, yeah, I've got to give them a plug. I do work for them occasionally. So anyway, they are approaching. They've got a very, very unusual format because they basically have 5 rounds of golf on 5 days, and then they pick the best 2 scores from the first 4 days, and the final day counts, kind of thing. So it's the way, right. I suppose, if you really do blow up on 1 or 2 days,
you can have a day or 2 off. Yeah,
that's
fair. That's fair. Keeps you in the game, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's it, you see. So just looking at the scores, I mean, a massive field, by the way, 160 boys and girls playing in this competition. So best of luck for everyone who's playing in the event tomorrow. We will cover all the news and the results from that in the next podcast. Right. But some events have been taking place. Not junior events, though. We're going to be taking a slight diversion here. We're going to talk about professional golf.
Controversial.
Youngsters who've been playing in professional events. We'll start off with Portugal Pro Tour. I don't know if you've covered any of these. I know you do a fair bit of professional golf yourself, Ian.
I've never done the Portugal Pro Tour. I would happily do it.
Absolutely. Get your plug in now. Yeah. Right. Now, couple of juniors, though, which have been mentioned on this podcast on a pretty regular basis. Certainly one of them anyway. Josh Berry and George Ash, couple of players who you've interviewed, I'm sure, on a few occasions over the last few years.
Definitely.
Now, they've had the Palmeiras Open, two separate opens. The first one, Josh Berry, he finished 4th, scores of 71, 70, and 73. And George finished 5th, 75, 71, finished with a 69. So well done to them. Then they had another event, once again at Palmeiras. So second event, Palmeiras, come up with a nice fresh name for it. No, they called it Palmeiras Open 2.
Oh, wow.
So yes.
Well done, marketing department.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. I think it was on a different course, whereby they could have actually named it after the course. Anyway, there you go. Right, little advice to you.
So somebody probably paid a lot of money to come up with that name.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyway, both Josh and George did really well again. Josh Berry, he finished 2nd this time, scores of 64 and 66, first 2 rounds, 72 in his 3rd round. And George Ash, once again, 2 cracking scores to start off with, 63 and 67. I think the pair of them might actually have been 1st and 2nd going into that final round. Unfortunately, George shot a 77 in the final round and finished 6th, though. But really well done. 2 top 6 finishes for a couple of young. I think Josh is 17. I think George might be 20 or might even be 21 now. So a couple of really young golfers there, still amateurs. So best of luck for them coming forward. Now, going back to the last podcast. Shall I read out what I said in the last podcast? Because I want to take a little bit of credit for this.
Okay, go on then, because I can't remember.
Germany's Chiara Neuer, 16-year-old, secured playing rights for the Ladies European Tour for 2023 after finishing 2nd in the LET Access Series Order of Merit. Well, she played on the Ladies European Tour last week. She did pretty well, Ian.
Oh, what happened, Steve? Now I know why you sent me this. There you go. There she is.
Absolutely. So how about that? So not only did she get her playing rights only a few weeks early to play on the Ladies European Tour, she only went and won it. So the Aramco Team Series took place in Jeddah at Royal Greens Golf Club. She won in a playoff. Now I had very mixed emotions when I was watching this, because her playoff was against a very good friend of mine, Charlie Hull.
I watched a bit of this actually. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and credit to Kaya, because basically into that playoff, and actually credit to Charlie as well, because when you go in a playoff, you don't want to lose the playoff. Well, Kayara birdied the first playoff hole. Charlie held a really good 10-footer to match her birdie. Went back down the same playoff hole again, and Kiara birdied it again to win it. So really, congratulations to her. Only 16 years of age and already a tour winner. So that is someone to watch out for,
isn't it? Yeah. Remember, hang on, everybody. Just remember that name and that face right there, because you're going to be seeing a lot of it over the next however many years.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit of idea of her background, she's originally from Germany. She represents Germany, but she lived in England, I think, from the age of 13 onwards until she was about, actually, it might be earlier than that, I think 8 until she was about 14. Then she went over to Dubai, and she's lived in Dubai for the last couple of years. So fairly travelled golfer already, even at the age of 16.
You say she represents Germany?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Has she ever played in Japan? Just wonder if she's ever played.
Japan. Probably. Yes. I wonder what we're talking about. Yeah. Should we gloat a little bit about the football at the moment, then, shall we?
Well, this is a golf podcast. Nobody wants to talk about that, but come on, England.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Right now, saying in professional golf, the Alps Tour final qualifying. We all mentioned this in the last podcast. 20-year-old Netherlands Lars van der Veit. He won the tournament once again. Another amateur golfer, so well done to him. So he finished top at the qualifying, 72. 2 cracking rounds to finish 67, 67, 11 under par, won by 2 shots from Irish golfer Robin Dawson, finished second in that competition. And just finally, the PGA Tour over in America, you might have heard of it. Just a massive congratulations to Charlie Woods on helping his dad win the Player Impact Program PIP award. As we know, Tiger appeared in just 3 tournaments this year and finished first. He actually only finished in one of those tournaments, but he still earned $15 million as the top performer in the PIP. And we all know why. It's because 13-year-old Charlie did so much publicity
Can I just
last
say,
year.
Tiger Woods, he's barely swung a club this year, and he still walks away. How much was it? 15 million?
15 million, yes.
15, yes. How much money is there in golf? Right. Now, I'm a fan of Liv, but Liv is obscene amounts of money. PGA Tour have up to their prize purses horrifically. Good for the players, of course. I mean, you combine the two. I mean, there's just so much money in golf. My problem is, Steve, it doesn't really find its way much further down the pecking order. That's my problem with it,
Yes. And how we change that is well, good luck on that one, basically. So
the Access Series is a prime example of this, but we'll cover all this off at another time, I'm sure.
Yes, right. So that wraps up the junior golf news then. By the sounds of it, I don't think we've got Peter in at the moment, but
no,
we do have
Peter, unfortunately.
No, so get well soon, Peter. Well, hopefully you might be able to join us at some stage, but you'll stay with me. You'll join me. Thank you very much.
I'll keep you company, Steve.
And of course, we have got the interview with England Golf lead safeguarding officer Petra Duvanna. So let's first of all then. So we were talking a lot with her about safe golf. So let's find out what is safe golf. Let's hear from Petra.
Safe Golf itself is a programme which is accreditation for clubs and counties, and it enables them to provide evidence to England Golf to show that they are meeting their safeguarding requirements. Now, before Safe Golf, clubs were carrying out safeguarding and counties as well, but there was no consistent approach. And we found that with the best will in the world, some of the clubs were a little misguided in what they were delivering, or they'd had to improvise a little. So you'd have a volunteer who worked in a school, so they brought their school policy over and they'd sort of hodgepodged it together to work for the sporting environment, and it didn't quite fit. So what we did was we've provided a suite of resources which have enabled clubs to get everything that they need in one place to make sure that they are meeting their safeguarding requirements under legislation, and that they're doing it within a sporting context. So it really does work and it's fit for purpose.
And it's aimed at not just clubs, but also individuals
counties as well. Yeah, of course, yeah. And within that, the PGA are part of Safe Golf, so they are responsible for making sure that their PGA pros are Safe Golf accredited as well. They check that their PGA pros have got the right background and experience to be carrying out the role with juniors, and they also make sure that they're up to date with their safeguarding training. So the PGA work alongside us really to make sure that the clubs are accredited to the standard that we need them to be.
So that's Petra talking about safe golf and what it involves. It's interesting that they mentioned PGA professionals there. And I know that you've worked closely with events which involve PGA professionals as well. And how important in your experience is it to make sure for those pros, the fact that they get the safeguarding correct?
Yeah, it's to be honest, it's something you don't really think about, is it, too much when it's pros as much as juniors, let's say, because you just assume a golf club's done all its risk assessments, and you assume a golf course is, even though there are dangers, and there's things to think about, you do kind of just assume that everything's going to be safe and everything's going to be fine. But that assumption is actually quite good, because we go into an environment where we automatically feel safe. Do you know what I mean, with golf clubs? So yeah, I think from a professional side of things, it's almost taken for granted, and that's actually not a bad thing, because it clearly works. You know, there's stuff in place to make sure people are safe.
Now we will go into more details about that. So we'll get Petra back in now. Look, as you well know, Ian, we've asked a lot of silly questions over the years, but I put a really silly one to her, but it's an important one as well, and that was, how important is safe golf to junior golfers?
Safeguarding in itself is nothing new, and certainly if you've been working with children and young people in any sort of walk of life, you will have come across the need to safeguard them and make sure that they're safe. But safe golf, what it's really doing is looking at making sure that within that sporting environment, those juniors are protected and cared for. So safeguarding as an umbrella term, it really is about protecting people that can't necessarily protect themselves. So you do see the high profile cases in the news and whatnot, which obviously make all of our blood run cold, but safeguarding isn't just about the very drastic end of abuse and neglect situations. It's also about looking after children's welfare at the lower level and making sure that they're cared for at the most sort of, at the basic level. We're looking at making sure that they're feeling welcome at the club, that they feel supported at the club, that if they've got any problems, if they're not getting on with other members, then they've got someone to talk to, and that they're really made to feel comfortable where they are and they know where to turn if they've got any kind of problem. So it's not just about those sort of front cover of the Daily Mail headlines. It is about making sure that children's needs are being met at every level, so that they enjoy the sport, they keep coming back, and we keep them as members for life.
You've obviously got a poster there behind with some smiling faces on
yes,
it.
very smiley faces.
Absolutely, and that is the key, isn't it? Because it's very easy to put not just juniors, but anyone off. If their first experience is not a good experience, it can put them off for life, can't it? So it's so important to do that, isn't it?
It is, it absolutely is. And actually part of the Safe Golf programme is providing adults at the club that children can turn to. So every club and county now has a club welfare officer or a county welfare officer, and they are the eyes and ears at the club. So they are there to support the juniors for whatever need they need. And they've had extra safeguarding training. They're well suited to the role. Like there's a whole role description that they apply for in the first place, and they do it because they want to make a difference. So there's always going to be an adult contactable for those young people that need a bit of extra support. And what I've seen since Safe Golf is that some clubs are including that club welfare officer as part of their induction process. So they're there when the junior comes for the first time, and they make that introduction, and they welcome them and reassure them and let them know that they are going to be cared for. So that's a really positive development. And like you say, if your first experience of anything is negative, you're not going to want to go back. And this really helps to make the juniors feel that they are being listened to and encouraged and valued, because they are the future of the game.
So obviously talked about lots of different aspects of am I still there? Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Steve. We just can't see you. Looks like everybody's. Oh, you're back. There you are.
Oh,
hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Right. There you go.
Oh.
Right. Obviously,
He's
talking
back.
about lots of different things there, Petra. So she was talking about, it's not just about the headline case. She's talking about the welfare officers at clubs as well. And the thing as well there is the first impressions as well, because when you go into an environment like that, where any kind of junior goes into, it is important to get that first impression right. And if it does feel like a safe environment, it's vital, isn't it?
It is. And, I was saying before that sometimes we just take things for granted, and you go to a golf club, it's safe. But when you think it's miles and miles of open land with balls flinging around the place, and, even clubhouses can be fairly treacherous places to go to, and anybody could be lurking around anywhere. There does have to be a degree of, trust as well. You walk into a golf club, and the staff, for example, if the staff, they've got shirts on, kept and just, look like they don't care, there's a problem there. If you go in and they look smartly dressed and they're polite, you can tell that the place is looked after and there's a level of respect. And if they care for their own environment, that means they're going to care for you and to make sure that you're safe.
And now one important aspect of the care and of looking after kids is what's called disclosure and barring service. So what's called a DBS check. This is why I asked Petra about that. Exactly what is a DBS check?
DBS checks you may have heard of before as being referenced as criminal records checks. So I think the criminal records checks give a bit more of a clue as to what they're about. Disclosure and barring is a bit of a woolly term, but essentially they are checks carried out on a person's suitability for a role working with juniors or adults at risk. So those checks are carried out. We carry out the checks for volunteers through our centralised system here. Clubs and counties just need to contact us centrally and we'll do that for you. But the check itself is conducted by the Disclosure and Barring Service via the criminal records system. So or anyone with a questionable criminal record or anything which is disclosable because it's felt it has an impact on that person's suitability for the role will be made known to England Golf, and we will report back to the club that the individual is not suitable for that position. And really it provides just a layer of reassurance about our volunteers, because as well as with the best will in the world, we like to think the best of people, but not everyone is suitable for this role, for a role with our juniors, or our adults at risk. So it does provide an element of reassurance, but it also acts as a deterrent. So if anyone is trying to get into one of those positions to potentially exploit or abuse the people in their care, it's going to put them off doing that.
Let's put ourselves in an example here. Let's go to a golf club. They're looking to do some junior coaching or whatever.
Yes.
Who needs the checks and who doesn't need the checks, if you sort of mean?
If you're talking about coaches, so the coaches that want to work with juniors will have their DBS checks through the PGA, and they will then feature on the Safe Golf register. So as a parent, if you want to engage your child with coaching, it's worth checking that register online, the Safe Golf register online, and making sure that that coach is on there. Now, if they're not on that list, it doesn't mean that they're a wrong un. It could just mean that their safeguarding training has lapsed and they're waiting for the next course to come up. Or it could be that their DBS check is still in the process of being renewed. Don't assume that they're a wrong un is my message. But I would still be asking the question. I'd be asking them, why are you not on this list? And getting a satisfactory answer to that. So apart from the coaching staff, anyone that's working in what's called regulated activity will need to have a DBS check. Now, we've defined those roles on our England Golf website to make it easy for people, but the roles that are going to need a DBS check would be a junior organiser, for example, because you have continued contact with children and you have an opportunity to build a relationship over a period of time, which could be potentially exploited. So that is a regulated activity role. The club welfare officer is also a regulated activity role, because obviously you're privy to information and you could have contact with children in a very vulnerable state if they come to you to make a disclosure, for example. Also, junior overseers require a DBS check, but all of those regulated activity roles are listed on the website, so it's worth having a look. And under Safe Golf accreditation, you do need to produce a Safe Golf personnel register where you list all of your members of staff and record that they've had their DBSs done and that their training is up to date. So that's really a little prompt for people. They need to do that renewal every year anyway. So when they check that personnel register, they can see if someone's out of date or if anyone new needs to be added on.
A DBS verify, what just explain what that is.
When you go through the DBS process, you need to produce documentation to prove your identity. Now, the DBS verifier at the club or the county is the person who's going to check those documents, for you. So you start your application, you select your method, your types of ID, and then you will take them to the club verifier who will verify that you are in fact the person on the photo on this passport, and they will just pop online and confirm that they've seen your documents, and that's it. So you don't need to send your documents off anywhere. There's no danger of them getting lost in the post. You just need to take them to the verifier, and once they've verified the documents, they'll give them back to you and you can take them away. So it's a much more secure way of doing things than having to send them here, there and everywhere.
And I suppose that verifier is almost an extra safety net, isn't it? Just to
Absolutely.
So there's not someone out there doing it all themselves and kind of like dodging the system. You've got someone there who's backing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. It's a role which doesn't require a huge amount of hours because there's not many DBS checks to do, and they only need renewing every 3 years. But at the same time, it's a crucial role, and it needs to be taken seriously by those who take it on.
So there's a couple of things which strike me with what Petra was saying there is the fact that it can be a reassurance, which is something you mentioned as well, but also a deterrent as well, because it can put people off. And I'll give you an example in a weird way how it scared me when something happened to me. This was a few years ago. I was covering an event a few years ago, and I hadn't been DBS checked because I wasn't an official person at the course. I was just helping out a little bit, kind of thing. And it was one of them golf courses, you've been to them before, where it was a 9-hole event, and the 9th hole just happened to be nowhere near the clubhouse, and it was just about to start rain. You could tell it was going to start raining. So I went out there and said, do you want me to give the kids a lift back in the buggy just so they don't get drenched, kind of thing? And they had parents with them. 3 kids jumped on the buggy with me. Okay, forget the fact that you weren't allowed to have 3 people on the buggy, kind of thing, for the moment. I know, shocking. There you go. So and the parents walked back with the golf clubs, kind of thing. Anyway, I got back to the clubhouse, and they were very young kids. I think probably one of them might have been 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, something like that. And he said to me, I need to go to the toilet. And I'm like, no. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa. And he said, and I think he said something along the lines of, he said, I can't get my belt undone. Oh. And I'm like, yeah. And you can imagine what's going through my mind, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, and this is obviously someone who's not suspicious in any way, shape, but I'm terrified of thinking, what on earth am I going to do here? Obviously I don't want the poor lad to wet himself, but at the same time, I don't want to, be stood there undoing his belt in a toilet, kind of thing. Now, I got really lucky in the sense of his mum came around the corner just as he was explaining this to me. So I'm like, but that, that's a deterrent for someone who isn't a threat, kind of thing. So you imagine if you are someone, kind of thing.
Yeah, but even if you are DBS checked, Steve, that's still, yes. I think with that, I mean, if I'd have been in that situation, I think I would have taken him to see a member of club staff and not past the buck or anything. But, if I'm out on the course filming juniors or something, and we've had it with professionals where we're filming and they've nipped off to the tree to have a pee. Do you know what I mean? And we're live, we're live across today's golfer and all of these places. And they're 20 yards away having a pee. And of course, Leon, my cameraman, has got his headphones in and he's hearing what I'm commentating on. But he doesn't know that he's having a pee because I can see everywhere. He can't see. So he starts to turn the camera like, no, because we're live. And, it happens in junior golf. It's happened at, the English under-18 championships before where they, sometimes the lads just nip off into the trees to have a pee, and they're under 18. And, of course, there's people around. And, it can be awkward.
Yeah, and also scary when you're in that scenario and you think don't do anything wrong, kind of thing. Don't drop me in. Anyway, right. Let's hear from Petra again, and we'll come to you more in detail about what she's going to mention here, because we're going to be talking now about photography consent and also videography for consent. Now, obviously, you do the videography. I tend to do the photography side of it. So what I wanted to find out was, as far as photography is concerned, do we, and as a videographer, do we need consent when we're out there photographing juniors in events? This is what Petra had to say.
Ordinarily, if we're taking photos at the club, then the parents will give consent as part of the sort of junior registration pack, which clubs provide at the start of the season. So parents will give consent whether they are happy for photographs to be taken and how they're allowed to be used at that point of information gathering. Now, some parents and carers won't be happy, so they can express as such there, and it's up to the club then or the county to make efforts to make sure that that individual is not photographed. But sometimes there'll be additional events and whatnot happening at the club where there may be an additional requirement for photos to be taken, maybe by England Golf even, or by other agencies that are involved with organising the tournament. And there may, in that case, be a separate requirement for consent to be collected. So essentially, we're looking at whether parents give consent or not for those photographs to be taken and used. And the individual taking the photographs, again, ordinarily, if you're a professional photographer, you'd be expected to have a DBS check if you're going to be photographing children, because there's obvious risks there. But if you're just a member of the club that's volunteered, or I'll take the pictures that day, then that needs to be communicated with the parents and carers to make sure they're happy with that arrangement. And those photographs would need to be stored at the club, not in the person's home. It's just about making sure that anyone who's volunteering with the best will in the world doesn't accidentally back themselves into a corner and get accused of something which actually they never intended to do. So yeah, imagery and photographs are something which everyone needs to think about before it gets to that point.
And that obviously, I mean, we're talking about photographs here, that also applies for videos as well.
Yes,
and in particular when it goes on things like social media as well.
Yes, very much so. So the person who's having the image recorded needs to know up front where this is likely to be used. If it is going to go on social media, then there's limited control anyone has over where that image ends up. So we may want to use that footage for our website or for our socials, but beyond that, it could be screen grabbed and used elsewhere. So there's very little control once it's sort of online as to how far it could go. So we just need to make people aware of that and let them know that we will do everything in our power to make sure it's used responsibly. And we certainly wouldn't use anything that would embarrass a young person, or if they were unhappy with it being used after the event, they could let us know and we'd take it down. So I think it's just about putting the young person's experience at the heart of what we're doing, because even if they give consent up front, they may change their mind later. That's in their gift to do that. So we have to listen to what they want and make sure that we honour that.
But GDPR as well, whereby putting names to faces which go with photos as well, and how has that changed the landscape, if you like, as well in recent years?
Well, GDPR and safeguarding really dovetail together, actually. So we're very cautious about putting imagery and identifying information online where anyone could access it. So it doesn't take a person much to piece together a picture which will allow them to potentially exploit that child. So if they are able to get that child's image, they're able to find out where they play, they're able to find out their name, and then they could probably quite easily work out where that child or young person may be at school, and they can start to build a picture. So we really are careful with how much information we'll use. We did some promotional footage around Girls Golf Rocks last year and the Young Ambassadors, and within that footage we just used their first names. So it was just about how much do we need to use, and if we don't need to use it, then we don't. There are occasions when clubs, for example, will want to publish on their website they're very proud of a junior who's run an event, and they'll want to use the full name. And again, with parental consent, that's okay. But it's then about being responsible and making sure that there's not enough information out there that someone who with untoward intentions could exploit.
Now, this is something that obviously that both of us have a serious situation with, in the sense that this is something we have to deal with on a regular basis, in the sense of, in particular with GDPR, with me taking photos, is that, you know, in theory, I shouldn't be able to put a name next to the photo when it goes on a website, because people can associate it with it. But as you well know, and people out there may not realise, but there are slightly different rules with the media, because obviously we can put photos in a publication to say someone won a competition, and obviously the photo would be the name of the person who's won the competition, so it's obvious who the person is, and he actually says so. So there are slightly different rules for the media as far as GDPR is concerned, and I'm sure it's exactly the same with you doing when your videographer is. It would be pretty pointless you doing a video of someone if you couldn't say who it was.
I mean, the amount of times I mention people's name, we put the name on the screen. I mean, we're quite fortunate with what we do, and you'll probably find this as well, Steve, is that, you know, in sport, these players are trying to get their names out. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like the complete opposite. They are trying to get as many people to see who they are and where they play, and this. And this is where probably safeguarding gets harder and harder and harder. Now, with regards to the live streaming that we do, fortunately, every series we work with, I think Petra touched on it there as well, and of course we work with England Golf, is before we even turn up to an event, the consent has already been signed, and it's been signed when you agree to play the tournament. That's one of the stipulations. If it's a live stream tournament, then if you don't want to be filmed, you don't play in the tournament. It's that simple. I've never ever had an instance where they've come to me and said, "Oh, by the way, these list of players don't want to be filmed." You know, it is part of the tournament. If we're going to live stream it, you play in this tournament, you sign, and in that, in the contract, I suppose, whatever it is you sign to say you're going to sign up and play the tournament, is in there that you will. There's a high chance you are going to be on camera live, and if you don't want to do it, then you don't play in the tournament. It's that simple.
So what Petra mentioned there is the fact that, well, what happens if they change them at a later date? And I've had that to a lesser degree with I've took someone's photo and they turned around to me and said, almost jokingly a lot of the time, "Oh, don't use that photo," because they know that they've just shanked it or whatever kind of thing. But in all seriousness, if someone did come up to you and say, "I really don't want," obviously yours is live, so it's slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah, but if they came up to me, you know, if I was live and they come up to me, because people do, the amount of times like spectators or family members come up to me and they don't realise I'm live and they're just chatting away to me, and I'm like, you know, I'm like trying to do this, and they just don't get it. I've never had that situation, but if I had that situation, and every now and again I do get it. Oh, look, they're a bit nervous with it. In fact, I tell you, I have had it before where they've come up and said, "Oh, they're a little bit nervous." In fact, we did. You remember Aaron Cox? We had him on this show. We did his junior, his Blackwell Grange Pro-Am 2 years running. We've done it now, and the first year we did it, Aaron was playing with a group of kids, and one of the kids, she's a really good player, but she was like nauseous because of the camera being there, and so she had to go off and be sick in the trees at one point. So then I had a quick word with the family, said, "Look, we're just going to take the camera away." So we made that decision for them. We didn't have to, but you know, I mean, they're kids at the end of the day, so you know, we're not trying to catch them out, you know.
No, and I suppose it kind of comes back to some of the points we made earlier, in the sense that you adapt to situations, and it's making the kids feel comfortable in that environment. I've had a situation where I don't take photos on the first tee because I just think they're nervous enough without someone sticking a camera in their face and someone taking a photo on the first tee. I'll wait until they get to the first green or a little bit further into the round.
I think it depends on the age group, to be honest, Steve. When it's like England Golf and it's English Amateur Champs and it's the English Under-18s and the Faldo Series, for example, events, we do film them at the first tee. And one of the reasons we film them at the first tee is because these kids, you know, they're the cream of the crop. And this gives them a chance to, because, hey, you're never going to have nicer, friendly media than us. I can tell you that. When you're in that first tee of the European Tour event or Ladies European Tour event, and there's a lot of people around you, and the sky cameras are there, it's going to be a lot different. If you've had a little taster of it, of having myself and Leon there, it will just, it's going to benefit you in the long run. And that's the point. If we had a bunch of 10-year-olds who were just playing for fun, then, you know, we probably wouldn't. We'd maybe just watch them come through on a fairway or something. You know, we're not going to interview them. We're not going to run up to them with a microphone and be like, "Oh, tell me how's your app." Do you know what I mean? Like, there's ways to do it. And we try and, my whole philosophy with this, when we do Faldo and when we do England Golf, is to try and give these players a platform that they can use for their own sake, to generate sponsorship and to gain experience, because they all want to make it. You're playing on the Faldo Series, you think, you know, you talk to every single kid and they're playing Faldo Series and you say, "What do you want to do when you get older?" "I want to be a professional golfer." They don't turn around and go, "I want to be an accountant." Do you know what I mean? So part of being a professional sports person is having to deal with the media. And we give them a very nice, easy way in of dealing with us And like I said, I've never, very rarely have I ever had somebody say, I don't want to talk. In fact, a lot of the time, I learned a very quick lesson in this. If you ask somebody for an interview, you give them a chance to say no. So I don't even ask them now. I just go up to them and just talk to them.
Very sneaky. We ought to mention as well that as part of the England Golf, this Progress Junior Golf podcast, we joined up with England Golf and the Young Ambassadors a few weeks ago, and we had to go through that protocol of making sure that those kids were safe to be on our shows. So all the kids who are England Golf ambassadors, they've been through that process to make sure that they're okay, because obviously they were under the age of 18, so they've got parents' consent. So that's the kind of process which England Golf goes through when they have the Young Ambassadors. It's unfortunate that unfortunately Peter couldn't make it today, because that's one of the things we were going to have a chat with him about, the kind of message he had from England Golf when his daughter became a young ambassador. Obviously, we've talked about some of the less serious issues, but we really need to tackle with some of the massive issues which do crop up within safety in golf, and this is something which obviously we're talking to Petra about. And this is a message for anyone out there, really. What do you do then if you do have serious concerns about the safety of juniors in golf? This is what Petra had to say.
People want to do the right thing, but they're not always sure how to go about it. If you have the slightest inclination that something's not quite right, then trust your gut is my advice, and let someone look into it. So share that information. You can share it with your club welfare officer for starters, or your county welfare officer, sorry. They have had additional safeguarding training, so they know what to look out for, and something that may not quite make sense to you may make sense to them in a broader context. So it's worth speaking to them first. The club welfare officer will then usually come through to the England Golf Central Safeguarding Team, which is comprised of myself and Craig Scott. He's a safeguarding officer, previously of the police, many years experience as a detective, and a wonderful, wonderful asset for us to have. So once that information comes to us, we will, in the first instance, it may just be words of advice. So it could be that this is nothing to be concerned of at this stage, but make a log, speak to someone else at the club. So what we don't want to do is create a situation where club welfare officers feel like they're taking the world on their shoulders and they're responsible for anything safeguarding related. That's not the case. They're not alone. They've got us here, but they also can speak to someone else at the club. And it's the right thing to do to speak to someone else at the club, because if the club welfare officer isn't around, there needs to be someone there who's got visibility on the issue. So it could be someone from the committee, it could be the golf club manager, but there needs to be someone there who can support that club welfare officer through the concern. At the lowest level, like I say, we'll probably give words of advice, and it could be that the individual who's causing concern, there needs to be a conversation with them. Sometimes it's an education issue. So we talked about photographs earlier. Certainly, some of the older generations, for example, they'll come to the club and they'll want to take photos of their grandchild. However, other juniors are about and it can cause problems. So they may just need educating about the photography policy, for example, something as simple as that. It could be that they're offering to give lifts to juniors who they know have got a long walk home and no parent available to collect them. Again, best will in the world, it's rainy at the moment. You're thinking you don't want a child getting soaked, but actually that could be misconstrued, or it could be evidence that actually you're trying to forge a relationship with that child, which isn't right. So it could just be simple as words of advice need to be given. However, it could be something more serious, which needs a full investigation. Now, once a concern comes to England Golf, we'll assess whether England Golf need to be involved from the earliest point, or if the club are able to manage it at a local level in terms of it being a poor practice issue, which can be remedied at a local level. At the very most serious end of the scale, and this is the 1% of cases that we sort of referenced earlier. Yeah, if that, the very 1%, then England Golf will take over the investigation, and it could be like multi-agency collaboration is needed. It could be that we need to speak to the police and get further information. It could be that an individual really is a risk to children and we need to look at what sanctions can be put in place to keep our juniors safe. But we've got powers at our disposal to be able to do that. And that is like the very top level of concerns. Most safeguarding issues are much lower level and are about making sure, like I said earlier, that that child's welfare and needs are being met.
I suppose the assumption is the fact that it's the adult which is
Sure.
causing the problems. It could be juniors within themselves. So how
Absolutely,
do you deal with that? I'm thinking in particular, perhaps the word which crops up here is bullying. How do you
Yes,
deal with
yeah.
that?
Absolutely. Well, every club and county need to have their own anti-bullying policy in place. The bottom line is that bullying won't be tolerated and that any allegations of bullying will be taken seriously. Now, we do support with bullying allegations at our end as well, but generally speaking, it will be to the club to try and manage in-house. It can be tricky, and the bullying doesn't just stay within the club environment. It can go online. It can spill over into school life as well. So it could be, again, that there needs to be more people involved. It could be that the parents and carers need to be brought in. It could be that the schools need to be kept in the loop as well. But what I would say from a starting point is that the position is it cannot be tolerated and it won't be allowed to carry on. And the sort of sanctions that we see where bullying occurs, they can escalate to the point of exclusion from a club, because it can be that detrimental to the person suffering the bullying that can't be allowed to continue. It creates a negative atmosphere for everyone.
If you are a child and you are being bullied, it's very difficult for them to speak up because they're being bullied. That's the whole point, isn't it? So, how can you encourage juniors to get that message across in the sense of when they feel as if we're safe by doing this?
So, I mean, it's not just in cases of bullying. It can be any sort of safeguarding issue where juniors are reluctant to speak up for a number of reasons. And it could be fear of more repercussions, or it could be a fear that they won't be believed, or worry about what will actually happen as a result of all this. So in an ideal world, we'd wave a magic wand and everything would be okay. But our okay might be very different to the child's idea of okay. The child's idea of okay might just be, I want the bullying to stop and everything to be happy again. That's not necessarily going to be achievable with the wave of a magic wand. So what we need to do is make sure that those juniors and young people feel that they have someone to speak to. And that's where the club welfare officer really comes into their own. So if there's no one else at the club that they feel comfortable speaking to, that club welfare officer should be there and present and visible so that they do feel that there's someone. Also, they may feel more comfortable speaking with someone at school. Even if it's a golf club issue, they could still speak to a trusted adult at school, and that information would come back to the club. Or they could speak to a parent, carer, or a member of the family that they trust. I do understand that it's difficult to get over that initial hurdle of speaking about it, and there may be some embarrassment and shame mixed in there as well, but it won't stop. It doesn't stop on its own. Someone needs to speak about it in order for us to be able to put safeguards in place to make it finish.
So that's Petra obviously talking about some serious issues within the safeguarding of juniors in golf there, and in particular towards the end they're talking about the bullying which can happen, because we've kind of, I think I said there in the question, we've talked a lot about it being adults to juniors. Well, obviously it can go from juniors to juniors. The intimidation, the safeguarding needs to be within that environment as well. I'll give you an example. Obviously, I won't name names, but I'm going into too many details of the story. But as you know, I run junior events. I had a situation whereby I was made aware of a boy and a girl, and the boy asking things which you don't ask of a young girl, shall we say. And I was made aware of this, and I was left in the situation, and I knew both of the children, and I say children as in both of them, they're under the age of 16, and both of them I like the parents of both of them, but it was left in a situation whereby it's not something I could ignore, because it needs to go to someone who I was in a position whereby I didn't know what to do. So I had to take it to the next level. And that then took it to another level kind of thing. in the end, I think at the top of my head, I think one of them was removed from their golf club and they had to go and join another golf club kind of thing. And even that other golf club was made aware of what had happened, so they were fully aware of the reasons why they were joining, kind of thing. So, and I'm pleased to say that both of those two people are involved in junior golf now. Well, actually, they're both. I think they might well be both adults now, or certainly close to it. So then it's not pushed them out of the game, but obviously there was a point whereby it needed to be addressed to make sure that something didn't go further.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point there. They haven't been pushed out of the game because, if they're under the age of 16, this is about education, isn't it? It's not about right, punish it. Well, you said something like we all do. We've all done stupid things that we look back and I think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, But
and in particular when we were teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, I never did anything.
Of course not.
I was always a good boy, but it's important that the child who said the things, they need to be made aware of it, but they also need to be given a chance and not judged and be like, look, you made the mistake. Here's why you shouldn't have done it. Do you understand why you shouldn't have done it? And if they're just whatever, then you're a bit like, okay, we've got a problem. But if they're a bit like, I am really sorry. I mean, I don't know what was said, of course, or anything like that, but I imagine the boy liked the girl or something, and or whatever, and perhaps just got a little bit carried away with himself. And just as long as he learns, just as long as he's educated, and like I said, and the club he went to, if the club that the new club had joined had said he wasn't able to join because of what he'd said or done, then we've got a problem. He's got to be given a chance to realise and be educated, certainly under the age of 16. When you're sort of 35 and you're still doing stuff like that, at what point do you be like, well, you should know this by now? Do you know what I mean? But yeah.
I'll give you another example, probably not as serious in the sense of, but an example of something which happened earlier this year. I was at an event, wasn't involved directly with organising the event, but I was at the event and there was a bit of slow play, and one of the boys who was about 4 groups behind just happened to be on fairways next to each other, walked over to the next fairway and had a word with the player and said, can you speed up, you're slowing everyone else up. That person then walked off that, finished their round of golf and went to their parent, I don't want to play a round of golf again. So it was one of them whereby you were kind of like having to safeguard that lad against the other person. That message has been put through to both of them, and it will be, because it wasn't an event I was involved with, but I'm putting together an order of, like I said earlier, I'm running the Charles Junior Golf Tour, helping run the Charles Junior Golf Tour next year. I'm also running the Junior Order Merit in a county. That's one of the things which I will be putting part of the rules, if you like, of the competitions, in the sense that if those types of things happen, then there needs to be not serious repercussions, but just as you mentioned there, they need to be taught the fact that that's not what you do, kind of thing, And I felt for the lad, kind of thing, because he wasn't the quickest golfer in the world, but he hadn't done anything necessarily wrong. He just had a bit of a mare of a round.
Was there an official there, though? Was there like did you have referees? I mean, we don't always have the luxuries, do we, at junior golf, to have referees going around. I mean, we do it at Fowler and we do England golf events, but I imagine if it's just like maybe a county junior competition, but I suppose it depends on age groups, doesn't it? Because if they're under a certain amount of age, they have to have adults with them anyway, so they'll be aware of the pace of play. It shouldn't be coming from a player, is the point, I think. It shouldn't be coming from a player. It should be coming from an official or somebody who's got, if you're the organiser and you said to a parent, you are allowed to say to them, can they speed up a little bit because pace of play is so, and there's a way of doing it as well, as, and I think is the point. If there's nothing worse than being told by a peer that you're not very good at something. Do you know what I mean? But if you're told by somebody higher up and they say, listen, don't worry about how you did it, but this is how we try and do it. We try and do it this way. You didn't do it wrong, but this is how we would like to do it going forward, if that's okay. And then you're like, oh yeah, okay, great. Then you don't feel like an idiot.
Yeah. Now let's actually hear from Petra again there, because I think it's a perfect link in, because the question I asked her was about competitions within juniors, because that can add an added level of stress as well. Let's hear what Petra had to say about that.
You hit the nail on the head there. The pressure of competition can be really challenging for some young people, and I think the that person's well-being needs to be prioritised. And what we see clubs doing brilliantly, and counties as well, is preparing those young people ahead of their first sort of competition or away day, and sort of laying the groundwork so that it's not all completely alien to them on the day. It doesn't feel like a really stressful, difficult place to land in, because they've had some time to process beforehand what's coming. And I think that's a really useful tactic to help people cope with their nerves, and also that sense of anxiety, which can creep up for juniors. But certainly there will be different challenges in different environments. And, you know, we're coming up to Christmas, we're coming up to party season, social season, and those environments can create challenges as well, where you have juniors and adults who maybe have indulged in a beverage or two, or mixing at the same time. You know, boundaries can get blurred, and people can get upset, can be caused, which wouldn't normally happen. And again, it's good to have someone like a club welfare officer with a clear head on site when you're having these sort of big social events, just in case, you know, things get fraught, not just between the kids, but between adults as well. It's good to have someone there who's able to sort of settle things down, you know, on the occasion that they may sort of escalate a little.
So creating the right environment is basically the message there from Petra. Right, we are running out of time here, and obviously, thanks very much for joining me, Ian. Obviously, just to discuss the topics that have been covering here. Right, the last thing though, we've got one more clip of Petra, just to talk about safe golf, and what message does that send out to juniors and parents out there, and also the important information of the contact information. So let's just hear from Petra there and about what safe golf does really for juniors and adults.
Shows for those who are interested in joining the sport is that we take juniors' safety seriously, and that by having these measures in place, we're doing everything within our power to prevent those situations from arising in the first place. So really, although safeguarding, you know, it can be a challenging subject to think about and talk about, actually a huge part of safeguarding is prevention. So putting those measures in place to create the best possible environment for fun and for enjoyment and for feeling safe, and having the backup plan in case things do go wrong. And it is a very small proportion of situations that end up at that level. But having everything in place just in case is doing the right thing, absolutely.
We also have to stress as well, we're talking England golf here, but it is nationwide as well. Both Scotland, Ireland and Wales as well are all involved with this.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I should mention, yeah, the other home nations, safe golf means slightly different things depending where you're based. So the England Golf Programme of Accreditation is the most extensive of the home nations at the moment, but certainly Gulf Island and Scottish Golf that are looking to expand their programme as well. And hopefully we'll get to a point where there's sort of an accreditation style system across the board. But I think at the moment, it really depends on where you are.
So just the contact information for anyone who does need to get in touch then, please.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. So I'm Petra Duvanna, and you can contact me at safeguarding@englandgolf.org. But if you wanted to go for someone completely neutral, then the NSPCC website is a fantastic resource for parents, juniors, professionals as well. And of course, if you are a child who really needs to speak to someone and you want to do it anonymously and confidentially, you can contact Childline, and all of those numbers you can find online very easily. But those services are there to support you, whatever your needs.
So obviously, fantastic the fact that we've got the contact information out there of anyone, and we'll echo that as the fact that if anyone does have any concerns, if anyone wants to find out a little bit more information about safeguarding in just in golf actually, but safeguarding full stop in all sports and in life as well, I think it's so important, isn't it, Ian?
100%. I mean, I don't know. I actually don't know the overall legal requirements, but you know they are there. I mean, just basic risk assessments is part of safeguarding, isn't it? And they're a legal requirement. So it's as I said at the top of the show, Steve, we almost take this type of thing for granted here in the UK, I think, a little bit, because we are very heavily regulated, and it just goes to show how good that actually is. Every single golf club, every golf tournament that we're involved in, Fowler Series, England Golf, all of them, they're all run properly and they're all regulated properly. And we pay our fee and we just turn up, and it's just expected, isn't it? I've never feared for my life or never felt I was in trouble or in danger going to a golf club ever. And that's a huge credit to not just the governing bodies, but the clubs themselves as well.
And it is important that obviously we maintain that, because we've said on many occasions during this podcast, first impressions for juniors perhaps more important than first impressions for adults, because it can literally put you off. Because if you turn up 100%. In that first environment, and so just finally, I'll just give you an example. If you turn up at a golf club and the lighting is dark, I mean, I remember my first ever day at Cubs years ago. God knows how it would have been, probably 8 or 9 years old. My memory now is a dark room. And I hated it. And I think, just on that, because it just felt not welcoming. So just simple things like that, it's you mentioned about when you walk into the club, not necessarily that I don't suppose a junior's going to notice whether someone is dressed particularly well or anything like that. But if they say hello and smile, wow, how much difference does that make to a child?
But here's where the members have got to play a part as well. And it might be worth us touching on this subject at some point, because I think, shall we say, there's a certain stereotype of golf club member, and in some instances it's not fair, and in some it is accurate. And imagine being 6, 7, 8 years old, turning up to a golf club, and you've got a group of people who don't really want juniors at the golf club because they take up tee times. That would stop you, wouldn't it, if you're getting a bit of a cold vibe from them. So the members, they've got a part to play as well, because the club will be there after them. And if they want to carry on playing at the golf club, the new business has got to come in, unless you want to fund the golf club single-handedly by yourself, then you're going to have to accept you need to bring new people into the game,
Yeah. And as someone who organises junior events, I target those golf clubs where I know that they'll get a good welcome, because I know that they'll put on a show.
Brilliant. But that's about being savvy as well, Steve. It's not just a case of, this golf club will have me. If you go into that golf club and everybody there's miserable, and the members don't really want you there, but you got it because it was a cheap rate and they want a quick buck. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't really, nobody wins from that, really, do they? Because the juniors you're bringing in will be like, I ain't going to play in that tournament again because it was horrible going to that place.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Now, we've got some podcasts coming up. We've got 2 more before the end of the year. Then the next one takes place on Wednesday, December the 7th. We're going to be touching, I think if you remember back, it was the first one where we did the first 2 podcasts was on what I do in junior golf and what you do in junior golf. The next one after that was college golf in the US. Well, we're going to do college golf in the UK for the next one. That's on Wednesday, December the 7th. And then the last one of the year, it will be on Wednesday, December the 21st, so just before Christmas. And we're going to be talking about winter golf, because obviously we are into the season whereby, what do you do at this time of the year? Because,
what is winter golf, Steve, by the way?
Absolutely. You and me both. I'm a summer golfer. I prefer the sun on my back. But
that's it. Hey, I won't be going to a golf club now until probably maybe end of March at the earliest, and even then I'll have the woolly hats out.
Yeah. So that might well involve going on a simulator. That might well going on a range. That might well involve doing some fitness training. That might well involve it could be anything, you see. But there are things whereby juniors can do during the winter to keep themselves engaged. And when they get that first competition, when it might be when the clock's changed in late March or April or whatever, they're right at it and they're raring to go. That's my experience. And when you organise competitions early in the season, the fields go through the roof because kids just want to go out there and play golf. So 2 big subjects we're going to be covering over the next few weeks. So interestingly, by the way, that podcast on winter golf, we've got Emily Horsted lined up to be on that podcast. So let's hope her dad doesn't pass on his illness to her and she's okay for that podcast. So
let him sit out.
Peter, I hope you're feeling better, and sorry you couldn't be on the show, but I'm sure we'll get you on at some stage. So that's it for the podcast. Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks very much, of course, to Petra as well for for the interview, and of course her work within safeguarding within junior golf. It's so important that we have people like her doing what she does, and also the clubs and juniors and organisers out there who help as well. So
just before we go, Steve, as well, now that we are wrapping up, do click that link to the Progress Junior Golf website as well. Wherever you're watching this, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's in there. You don't even have to type it out. Just click it, it'll take you straight through. Check everything out. progressjuniorgolf.com. That's his website.
That's it. And we shall see you in 2 weeks' time for UK college golf in junior golf. See you later.
Thanks for watching.